Okay gang, here's something new, at least new to me at Joe Daddy's Garage. 68 GMC 1-ton chassis. I know it doesn't look like a 1-ton, but the VIN number says it's a 1-ton. It also has 8-lug wheels, has 3500 and V6 underneath the GMC. You can't really read it, but it's there, trust me. And it was ordered as a cab and a chassis, so it did not have a bed. And from what I'm seeing, it was a long bed. The frame has been cut and they put a short bed on it. And it doesn't quite line up, I don't think, the way it should. But the cool part is, being it was a cab and chassis, they ordered it with buddy buckets, which is a rare thing to find. And it's a 4-speed, but look at this. There's hardly any rust, or minimal rust, compared to most of these trucks. You got a little bit down here, and just a little bit back here, next corner on this side. And door shut nice. Missing some mirrors. Got the antenna in the wrong place. Got some bubbling in the glass. That's not a big deal. And it is a custom, so it would have had trim on it. That's the only remaining piece of trim. But all the clips are there from where it used to be, and the witness marks. So I'm probably going to try to find all the trim for it. Of course, it has 8-lug wheels. Here's the other side. A little bit of rust down in that corner, and I can fix all that. Or I can just leave it alone and just make it a cruiser. I don't need to have it perfect. In fact, I wouldn't want to use it so much if it was perfect. But it does have the trim around the glass, which is nice, front and rear. It's got the trim split in the cab with the white roof. There's the front trim. Let me show you what else. Booyah! Big honkin' V6. When have you ever seen those before in one of these trucks? Now, I don't really care that it's in here. I mean, it doesn't mean much to me. I'm not going to pull a freight train with this thing. So I'm probably going to take that out and put a 350 in it, or an LS engine. I'm not sure which. Hey, it's even got GMC on the valve cover. So I may just put this up for sale, the engine I mean. But hey, it's got power drum brakes. It's got power steering. Hard to pass up. Look at the firewall. No rust anywhere in that firewall. I do need an inner fender, not a big deal. And I need some trim that goes around the front end. That's all available. But I don't want to build it into some fancy truck. I want to make it a work truck, you know, a shop truck for Joe Daddy's Garage. And that's what it'll be. But I may later on, if I can find one, I may put a stake bed on it. I think it'd be cool to have a short bed, basically a 1-ton, with a stake bed on it, and be able to haul stuff with it. Well, I'm starting on it. I know I have tons of things going on, but I just can't take it anymore. So I'm going to tear apart this 2006 2500 HD in preparation for putting a 68 GMC cab on it and a stake bed. I've already listed all the sheet metal parts on Craigslist. Hopefully somebody comes along and scoops up these good parts. I would say the bed's no good. I mean, it's decent, but it's just beat up and ripped. And yeah, of course the back of the cab. But it's coming apart. Tired of looking at it and tired of waiting. Well, I'd say I'm off to a pretty good start. Of course, this is all the easy part of getting all the sheet metal off. And I've really only been at this for about 3 hours. And granted, I'm not trying to take care of this stuff very much. I'm not, you know, beating it up, but it's not like it's going to get, you know, repainted by me or anything. So the next big step will be getting that cab off the rest of the way. Well, it's been a busy day. Beautiful day in Georgia. Beautiful day for cutting up a truck. That's right. Took it all apart. I've actually sold off some sheet metal. and some stuff, and now I'm starting to get down to the nitty-gritty. And I've been reviewing how I'm going to do this. I had seen some where they had moved the rear axle forward, but that was a standard cab truck, and after looking at it, that's not going to work. So I'm going to go back to the idea of sectioning out some frame. There's a split seam right there, and moving everything back about 2 feet, including the torsion bar, cross member, the tranny mount, and whatever it takes to get there. Well, all right, I made some progress today. I had to get all the wires separated. Didn't cut any of them. I got the Hydro Boost brake separated. Of course, just had to pull the steering column and everything else to get up the front of this cab off. At this point, and I'll show you, there must be, I don't know, 10 miles of wire under this dash. I may be exaggerating, but sure felt like a lot of wire. And boy, it took me some time to get all that separated and out of the way, and most of that's going to get hooked back up. I've been reviewing my measurements a little bit. Now, if you took a standard cab, 67 to 72 long bed, they were 127 inches in the wheelbase. This truck is 158 inches. Obviously, that's too long to make it look right. So the plan, like I said before, is to shorten it up, and it's gonna, I think 23 inches will make a big difference. The difference between what's here and the factory style truck would be 31 inches. I'll be able to take out 23, and the only reason I say 23 is because this cross member, which supports the torsion bars, has to move aft. And if I measure from here basically to this point where this cross member is here, which holds the carrier bearing, that's about 23.5 inches. So I want to make it stop just a little bit short. I don't want to get back into this cross member area, and it partly has a curve, so I don't want to, you know, fight with any of that stuff. And I think if I go to that 23 inches, that'll leave me with 8 inches. And then, my plan is to put stacks on this thing. If I go with some 5-inch stacks, that'll take up most of that gap and leave me some play in between. I think that's going to work out perfect. The funny part is, this drive shaft, when I take out 23 inches, that thing's going to be 7 inches long. I don't think it's a big deal because it's going to be in that carrier bearing, and it's just an extension anyway. Other than that, the challenge will be cutting out these welds right here, and then there's some more welds on the inside. I don't know if you can see it or not. Yeah, there's some welds right there, so I'll have to grind those out. And then I'm gonna leave the front half of this alone, all this plumbing, but I'm gonna have to shorten this line. Probably just put a union in, and I can easily get rid of that distance. The other thing is I'm gonna have to shorten these two fuel lines, and I'll have to figure out how I'm going to do that yet. I'm not fully decided on that yet. So tomorrow I'm going to start breaking things loose. I'm going to have to pop these rivets out of there, and I'm probably going to cut off the cab mounts that are already on this thing. They're just going to be in the way, so I'll eliminate those. And the cross member for the tranny is bolt in. You see the bolt down there, so that'll be easy enough. And then once I get all the welds broke loose, and before I get all the welds loose, I'll support the front section of the frame, and I'll support the rear section somehow too, but I need to support the front because it's not going to move. I'll cut the welds out, pull that back, cut off my 23 inches, bring it back up to that same point, and weld it in. And you know, technically the transmission's not moving, none of that stuff's moving, the frame is coming closer to it. Okay, so this is the beginning of part 2 in the series of the GMC conversion. And this morning I pulled the drive shaft. I actually cut off the exhaust back there so I could handle the back half easier. I removed the catalytic converter from the right bank, so since it unbolted, and then I pulled the sleeve, the slip sleeve, off of the left bank. Got those out of the way. I separated the wiring harness from the top of the frame, or the side of the frame where it was at, the brake line and the fuel lines, and I'm working on getting some bracing. I've got to come up with some more jack stands to support the load, because the transmission, the cross member comes up from the bottom. You can see right there. And so when I pull those bolts, it's going to want to drop down. So I'm going to put some jack stands underneath that, and probably lower it an inch or two so I have some room, and let it just go for the ride. And the of course, the torsion bar cross member has the rivets in it. You don't have to cut those off or grind those out. Now the plan also is, I was going to cut these perches off, but I'm going to do that later. I've already checked both sides, and that's going to be my measuring point. So if I hook into that one and I draw back, I'm at 41 5/16. So I'll just subtract 23 inches from that, and when these come together, that'll give me my measurement and give me square side to side, which I know it'll be close regardless. So that's the plan at this point, is to get some more bracing underneath it, and then I've got to figure out how I'm going to walk the back half of the frame forward, because my driveway is tapered right here, and so that'll be a little bit of a challenge, but I'll figure that out. Alright, so I moved a little further along in this process. I've unbolted the transmission cross member, and it's sitting on the jack stands like I said. I drilled the holes where the rivets were, or I should say drilled the rivets that held the cross member for the torsion bar, and I've already prepped the new holes. I just measured off 23 inches, came up off the frame, the same dimensions, and that shouldn't be an issue to get those in place. Now also I'm gonna for the cross member, I'll figure out where they're gonna end up, and I'll pre-drill those holes as well, because it'd be more challenging to drill them with that in place than it would be to have it in open space. Other than that, I'm gonna have to separate the fuel line so that the line can go up over the tank, and the brake line I may just bow it for now so it gets out of the way. I've got my lines marked. Here's the 23 inches that I'm going to cut on, and really I'm not so worried about this being a zero measurement, let's say, because I'm really overlapping, so it doesn't really matter as long as I have about 6 inches there, because my real measurement's going to come off of these mounts, and I'll just pull it together until I get or eliminate that 23 inches. I'm getting closer. I made the cut at 23 with my Sawzall, and I cheated a little bit because I couldn't get in behind with my cutter, my Ziz wheel, so I used my plasma cutter and just took a little bit off that edge, and that made it a little bit easier. So now, ta-da! I'll clean that up a little bit. Do the same to the other side. I've already cut it with the Sawzall. I've also drilled the holes for the tranny cross member, so all that's ready to go, and I've separated all the front section up there. That was a little bit harder than I had hoped it would have been, mainly because the weld was so deep, and I had a hard time cutting into it and separating it. Hopefully I can get these two joined back together. I don't know if I'll do it tonight yet, or if it'll be tomorrow, but I'm liking it. That's it for today. I'd hoped to have it welded, but I'm pretty happy to have it pieced back together. I've already done my measuring from there to there. It's 18 5/16, so that puts me on the money. I used my tie-down straps from the car trailer to pull it together. So tomorrow, next step, I'm going to buzz all that back together. Probably use my flux core welder to get a nice deep burn, and then I'll start trimming off stuff like these cab mounts that I will not need, and dealing with stuff like shortening this line, reattaching the brake module, and attaching the torsion bar. You see the holes line up. I just have to lift it up, get it in place, and then of course get the holes, get the bracket bolted on for the tranny cross member, and I'll be moving right along. And the next phase after that, I think, is starting to figure out where the cab's going to sit. Well, I got up to a wet morning here in Georgia. Apparently it rained last night. It's still kind of overcast and misty, but that's not going to stop me. I'm going to keep on working. A couple things I wanted to show you. I got my bolts in, used grade 8 hardware for the cross member for the torsion bars. I also got the bolts back in for the cross member for the transmission, and I started welding up the frame. I'm going to do the other side. A couple things that are kind of give me a little problems, and I'll figure this out. One is the carrier bearing mount is now directly in line with the cross member for the torsion bars, and it also interferes with the exhaust. The exhaust isn't such a big deal. I think there's a way around all that, but I'm going to have to use probably the carrier bearing or something. So I'm going to have to re-engineer this configuration, and I may end up just moving this back some. I've got limitations of the gas tank, but I'll figure something out. When I get there, I'll let you know. Other than that, I'm pretty happy with it. And I think if somebody were making a truck out of a regular cab pickup or something else that was similar, they wouldn't have the issues of shortening the frame and doing all this work that I'm doing. But hey, that's what it is. I got a good deal on it, and I'm going to make it work. So okay, I've about had enough for today. It's been a steady mist coming down, and I've accomplished what I wanted to get accomplished. I welded and put some self-etch primer on the joints there. I got the pump mounted for the brake system, and I'd mentioned before about separating or making shortening the line and making a coupler. I just looped it. Basically, I just brought it back and looped it and consumed the length that I needed with the loop. I don't think it would hurt anything. That way I don't have to break the line, don't have to splice it. So that should work. The other thing on this cross member, I'm just going to cut that thing off. It's in the way, and there's no way I'm going to be able to use that piece. But I may salvage that plate, and I'll probably, since there's so much room underneath the cab when this will be mounted, because this is my measurement, rough measurement, where the back of the cab will be. So that's 73 inches from wheelbase center to back of cab, rough estimate. So that cab is going to, be here, and there's going to be a lot of room underneath it. What I'll probably do is build a cross member that'll sit on top of the frame, and it'll be back here in this area somewhere, and I'll make some brackets or whatever I need to do and run it across, and then mount that plate. Once I cut it off, turn the plate around 180 and make it go back, and that'll give me a little more length on the short drive shaft. And then I'll just shorten, I'll have to shorten them both, but it won't leave me with a little tiny drive shaft here. It'll give me another, maybe a foot. But I think that'll work, and by doing that and coming on top of the frame, those two pipes, I can use what's left of them, and it may change as I go along, because I mentioned about putting stacks on this thing, so we'll have to see how that works out. But anyway, that'll take care of the interference problem with that side of it. Well, I decided to keep going. There was just too much time left in the day, and I pushed the basket case Camaro up under the other Camaro and rolled the monster chassis into the garage, kept working on it. Took out the plasma cutter and I lopped off the old cab mounts that I don't need, and I'll grind those down some. I doubt if I'm going to remove them. I did cut off the cross member that was in the way, and I just hung one pipe back on it just to see how that plays out. I was debating on whether I would even need the carrier bearing, but I think I'm going to have to. There's just too much length between the differential and the drive shaft, and I don't think it would interfere and like hit this cross member, but I think it's just too much length, and I would rather have a short shaft and a carrier bearing. So I'll come up with something to compensate for that and get that in place. I did have to take this pump back loose, and the fuel lines run behind it. So I ran the fuel lines behind, I put everything back in. You can see the bolts out here that hold the fuel, or the pump for the brakes, and this is actually the bracket that holds the fuel lines. And just don't judge me, this looks like crap, I know, but I didn't want these fuel lines exposed any longer. I'm going to try to figure something out to where I can either find some shorter lines or something. I don't like the way that looks. Alright, here's one last look. I just took the 68 for a little drive, and still runs. Still won't do more than 55 miles an hour, but that's going to change. So kind of gives you an idea of the difference of just the height of the trucks. Here's the side view. That, my friends, is a big block 305 V6. Yeah, it still runs, and it'll be for sale when everything's done. Alright, it's been a little over an hour. I got the whole front clip off. Fenders, grill, hood, bumper, inner fender. I only had one inner fender, so that was fairly easy. But the wind's blowing, so I'm hoping it's not affecting this. But the next thing is to separate the junction for the fuse block. I won't be using that, so, but it's got a 3/8 bolt. Pull that bolt out and the plug will separate. Gonna separate the steering column, pull it out of the truck, separate the brake booster. Just has the bolts up here in the back, and of course the rod that connects to the brake pedal. Get all the wiring harness off, pull the hoses from the heater core. I'm going to leave the radiator and core support and everything hooked up. I'm not going to use it anyway, but I'm going to use parts of the core support, but I'm not going to need the whole thing. I'll leave the heater box hooked up for now. Then I'll pull the doors, pull the seat out that I had put in there before. I don't know if I've shown you this or not. This is a seat out of a Toyota T100. Shadows aren't helping. But it's got a little armrest in the middle there. And I built the brackets to support that. I'm going to pull that out. Pull the cover off of the transmission so that the shifter will clear when I lift the cab. And pretty much gut everything I can out of the cab so I have less to fight with. And custom is right. Well, it's about 5 hours into the whole thing. Steering column, brake boosters off, wires are separated, pulled the seats back out, pulled the doors, transmission cover, dash, cab mount bolts are out. So now I'm going to get it in the garage, hook it up to the hoist, and see if I can't get it to clear, get the cab to clear the core support, and get this moving. Well, now that I have the cab off the 68 chassis, and I will say again, this 68 chassis was a long bed dually. This was a farm truck at one time and probably had a stake bed on it. Somebody shortened it and made it basically a 1-ton short bed with this monster V6 and granny low 4-speed. But in that process, I got to looking at how they did this, and you can see where they put in some diamond plate. You can see the shape there. That's overlapping the seam where they had cut the frame. And they did that on both sides, so that's a good thing. You know, you can see the weld there. But the other thing is, look at this front shaft and a carrier bearing, and look at the back shaft. That's funny. That back shaft is maybe 2.5 feet long, and that's strange to me. I would have shortened the front shaft, but that would have involved moving the cross member. So, as my concern was for the other one in the 2006 HD chassis, these people went a different direction. I can't say that I would have gone that way though. But at this point, I'm pretty much done with this one. I'm going to put this up for sale, get it on Craigslist somewhere. Somebody wants it, and get it for sale. And now I can focus on getting that cab sitting on the new chassis. I'm really happy to have this off of that old chassis now. Okay, this is just the initial look at how the cab is going to sit. I think it's going to clear most everywhere, except I have a problem with the frame, or the cab I should say. The frame is 44 inches wide at this point, and the cab at the top up here is about 41.5. So I'm going to have to cut out a piece to make clearance for the cab on both sides. Hate to do that, but there's really no way around it. You know, if I really wanted to and go crazy, I could probably custom build that to where you'd never notice or see the difference. At this point, I'm not worried about it. All I want to do is make it fit the cab so I can get my mounts figured out and get them in place. As you can see, the cab is, I hope you can see, the cab is tilted forward right now. I know it's kind of hard to tell from these angles, but it's tilted forward, and it can't come down until I section out the back of the cab there. So I'll get that moving and do some adjusting and see what I can come up with. I have to say I'm pretty darn excited about this. I've adjusted the cab around a little bit, trying to make sure things line up, and I've had to raise it just a little bit so that I could clear the core support And I still am going to do some adjusting on that because I'm concerned that the hood may interfere and hit the core support. So rather than raise the cab up any higher off the frame, I'm probably going to relocate the mounts for the core support, because there are, well, there's 3 or so inches, maybe 4 inches that I can play with right here. I could either make these mounts go away, put in some flat rubber, or I could cut these ears off, drop it down an inch or two and weld it back on. I'm not sure exactly which way I'm going to go yet. I'm leaning towards cutting them off because I want to keep those bushings, and there's plenty of room. The other thing I have to deal with at that point, and I just thought about that, is the fan, because the radiator fan, there's only so much clearance for that thing as well. That's something I have to consider. So I'll look into that a little bit more. Otherwise, everything is clearing. The transmission clears easily. There's plenty of room for the hydro boost to bolt up. Of course, the steering column. And I think I can even use my factory inner wheel or inner fenders that I have, came with the 68 truck, and mount this stuff on top. On the passenger side, I'm probably going to do away with the airbox, and not that I have to, but I just want to have probably a more efficient box there, and there will be room, for the inner fender to fit on this side as well. I may have to clearance them where the shocks sit. I think there may be a little bit of an issue there. I'll figure that out when I get to it. I did notch the back of the cab, and the cab is offset right now. It's sitting a little bit to the right. That gap will get smaller if I go to the left. I'll show you what I'm talking about. You can see the cab's up against it right there, or up against the frame. So I talked about building the cross member for the carrier bearing. I'm still kind of debating on that, but the reality is I'm going to have to build something to support the cab, and the mounts, the bolts, are right there, just a little offset from the frame. When I adjust it over, it'll be more inboard of the frame. So I may build a cross member that does multiple things. I may have it support the cab and support the carrier bearing all at the same time, and save me some trouble and make everything work. In the front, I'll have to fab some mounts. There's the original cab mount locations, and come up with something to get that in place. But as you can see, there's all kinds of room up under this cab because it has to sit up. The way this frame is designed, this frame drops down, and I'm pretty excited. I mean, I think this thing looks killer with this configuration. I think the wheel is pretty darn close to being in the center of the opening of the wheel well. And once I get those final adjustments for the hood and get these mounts in, I don't see it being too long before I'll be driving this thing down the road. So this will be part 5 in this video series. Sorry about the light coming in, but the only real fitment thing that I'm running into at this point is the way the hood meets this core support. And it's only a problem because this bracket, which supports, I guess it's the oil cooler and transmission cooler, is too big and in the way. So I'm going to trim this off to start with, take out probably down to this line, and eliminate this upper half of this thing. I'm still debating on whether I want to keep the AC components because I don't plan to run air conditioning in this truck, at least not at this point. So I may be able to even pull this out, the condenser, and do something else with this piece. But for now, I'm just going to trim off this and get it out of the way. I've mocked up the cab, and I've dropped screwdrivers. You can see that one or not. The sun's kind of there it is, drop screwdrivers through the frame, or through the cab mounts to show where they line up on the frame. So the front ones are square on the frame, and the rear ones are just inside the frame. That's not a problem. I mean, I'll just have to come up with a mount that has an ear on it that comes over and supports that. I've got a gap between the gas tank and the back of the cab, which is good. Everything is level to the frame. Here's the other screwdriver, it makes it a little more clear. You can see that. This will be real easy to make this perch. And then the driver's side, or passenger side, there's a handle. Again, coming down and hitting the frame, and I can square that up to show where it's really hitting that. So the passenger side is going to be pretty easy to fab up some mounts. The driver's side will take a little more work because of the brake lines and stuff like that in the way, as you can see there. So I may have to reroute some things, but that's all part of it whenever you're building something custom. The fenders line up pretty well in this core support. I'll have to weld a tab, and I'm going to bolt right to that. Same thing on the passenger side. And I've got the core support. I got this block here to hold the, because since there's nothing holding the core support in place, just to kind of give me some space to show where it's at. I may not have to lower this thing like I thought about, you know, the dropping the core support down a little bit. I think it's going to ride out okay. The other thing I'm going to run into problems is these parking lights, because the parking lights themselves are pretty deep and there's no room to fit them in there. Here's one back here. You can see that's a pretty deep gap, and that's a pretty narrow space, and there's just not going to be enough room to make that thing fit. So I may have to custom make some parking lights out of these things, but that'll come later. For now, I want to get the cab mounts made and get this thing sitting comfortably on the frame, and make sure this hood closes. Alright, so I still have fitment problems with the hood closing. Actually hitting part of this right here and catching a little bit right here. So I may end up having to drop the core support down a little bit to make this clearance. I can just show you it's close, but it's just a little bit, can't really show you, just a little bit of fitting problem. So I'll figure that out, but in the meantime I decided to build some cab mounts, and you're gonna like this, at least I hope you will. This is what's left of the frame section I cut out, which was 23 inches on either side. And what I've done is I took the cab mounts from the old chassis, and they're a little beat up, but that's okay, I can get new ones later. I'm just doing this to fabricate. I cut out a section of steel off of the old frame piece, pretty thick stuff. It's about 4 inches wide and I don't know, 7 inches long. And then I burned a hole, and this is where a plasma cutter comes in real handy. I burned a hole so that will sit down inside just like it was designed on the old chassis. And I'm gonna have to trim this part down a little bit. It's a little bit fatter than the opening, but I can remedy that. So let me just show you how that worked out. I have the passenger side tacked up, or actually mostly buzzed in, but there it is, and I like it. Now I could come back later and add some support bracing in those open areas, and I'm going to weld more on it. I think that's going to work, and I may be able to do something similar for the back. I'm still figuring that out. Of course I have to deal with that cross member issue and everything else. But okay, so I pulled the cab back off, and just to show you, there's the front cab mount, and I think that's going to work out really good. And like I said, I may add a gusset maybe on this side to strengthen that up a little bit, but that stuff, that's so thick I don't feel like that's going to bend at all, but I may do that. in the back, just to show you this is again that piece of frame that I cut up, and I squared it and got it located, and it's welded on. The rear cab mounts on this original truck were a bit different looking. They had these, you know, biscuit kind of shape, and they had this real long shaft here, and then this piece slid over that, and then this real long bolt went up through the floor, up through that mount, I should say, this direction, and went into the cab mount, which is back here, right there. So with what I have to work with, I decided to reuse these mounts. But what I did is, let's see if I can show you a good angle, I cut it down. I took cut off that much from this piece inside, and then I trimmed off that much of the rubber piece, and that's nothing but rubber anyway. And I know it's supposed to take up some of the vibration, but now with that in place, I'll be able to run a bolt up, and I don't believe it'll affect any interference with this frame. What I find interesting with this, I'm getting tar all over my gloves, is these bolts, when I pulled them out, are just covered in tar. And even on the inside of the mount, it's got tar. And I don't know if that was supposed to be like a hopeful rust preventive or what, but it just made a mess. You know, it's leaking out from where I cut it, and just kind of makes it hard to not get it all over my camera. So what I'm going to do is focus on building a similar thing over there, and I've got a location picked out. I made sure I had dropped the screwdriver down through the hole to verify, and it's actually that mark right there. So it'll be a little trickier with this tank in the way, and I may not be able to do it exactly the same way, but I'll come up with something. Okay, that worked out pretty good. I basically duplicated what I had here as far as length and angles, and then I compared it to the other side, and I cut off excess material as needed using the plasma cutter, which, man, I'm so glad I got that thing. That makes this so much faster. So now I can set this on the other side, and I'll show you that in a minute. But what I also wanted to show you was, you know, with our modern phones and technology, right in our hands we have stuff like a bubble level. So I can verify that my side to side is level, and I can verify my angle. And all I have to do is replicate that on the other side. I already have my hole center. I already know where it's supposed to be based on my previous mark. So I'll get this in place, and that'll take care of the location of the rear mounts. And just let me show you how I trim this. So my mark is down here. All I have to do is get that positioned. And if I had three hands, I'd show you the bubble level thing again, but I'm not. So I've got some clearance around the gas tank. It's bigger than it looks, really. I think that'll take care of the rear mounts. So from there, once I get this in place, I'm going to go back to shortening the exhaust, the right bank. I need to get that catalytic converter up closer to this one so that I can do my exhaust the way I want. And then I'll work on that cross member thing. I'll also finish welding the front mounts and decide whether I want to add any more bracing to those. I'm thinking they're pretty solid. Okay, so there's the left rear cab mount welded in, and I've got this crossbar welded in that I'm going to use for the carrier bearing. What's really cool, and I think somewhat funny, is this piece of pipe was just laying in my metal pile, and it was the exact width that I needed. I thought that was funny. Didn't have to trim it or anything, just pulled it out of the pile and used it. Now I also took a couple pieces of that leftover frame and made some, you know, standoffs so I can get it up a little bit. And the reason I did that was to clear the exhaust on that side, and I'll still have to shorten up that pipe like I had said. But, and if I hadn't said this before, I must say it again, that the plasma cutter is just awesome. This is that plate. Well, there's all the pieces and parts from that piece of pipe that ran across underneath where this new pipe is, from there over to that location. This is the plate that I need to support the carrier bearing. And so, I'm not going to put it in this direction, I'm just showing you. I'll be able to weld that on nice, and it'll definitely do exactly what I want. I'm going to install it this direction, but just to show you how nice it's going to fit. I'm pretty happy with that. And I've already double checked. I'm right about on the money as far as height. I measured off of this cross member before. I kind of held it in place and got a measurement. It's about 4.5 inches from the cross member to the bottom of this plate. So I'll just turn that around, square it, buzz that on, and that's going to take care of the carrier bearing and the cab mounts. And then I think all I have left is the exhaust. Yeah, it's moving right along. I got the plate in for the carrier bearing. I cut down the exhaust. I ended up cutting out this length of pipe here from this pipe, and I cut the flange off of the end and relocated it back here. And now this section of pipe will bolt directly to this one, and I'll end up trimming off the end of it. It's still long, but that'll be, you know, somewhere in this range, which the back of the cab, if I remember, yeah, it's right about here. So as long as I'm in this range, it'll be fine for the exhaust. Other than that, I'm just going to do a little more cleanup work. I tried to grind off or cut off some of these pieces left over from the old cab mounts, but if I really want them off, they're gonna have to come off with a grinder, because it's like they're fusion welded on somehow. I tried to salvage this one to make a cab mount out of for the back, and I cut way down in that thing and it's still welded. So probably more work than it's worth. So I'll just grind them down a little bit, smooth up the edges so there's nothing to catch a hand on, and do like I did there, and just put some primer on them. I'm getting ready, just about ready to mount the cab back up. I still have to play with those fuel lines a little bit. I still don't like those. I did have a YouTuber suggest some copper fittings, and I need to resolve that before I completely commit to mounting the cab back up. But I'm pretty happy. Things have progressed really well. I think this is technically day 7. Yeah, so 7 days I've been working on this, and that takes care of the gas lines, 2 3/8 unions or couplers, and that's much better. I like that a lot more. Now the only other thing is they're close to this new cab mount that I built, so I will take a piece of hose and split it and push it around that, maybe put some black tape around it or something, so that it has less chance of hitting on this new cab mount. Everything else is ready to go. I got the exhaust put back together, cut off that length, so now I should have enough room to make the turn down and out and up for the stacks. And other than placing this main wire bundle, getting it routed, which can come later really, because the cab, there's all kinds of room underneath, and it's just going to need a loop anyhow. Other than that, I'm about ready to set this cab back on, maybe for the last time. I'm liking it. I think this will be the end of this video, and I will progress into the next one. And thanks for watching. This has been a fun project.